Ozzy.
All right, cool.
Thank you for joining.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for having me here, man. It's been very inspiring, very motivational, and I'm super curious just to like pick your brain and learn about how you started and how you got here. I did a little bit of research, so I'm gonna go through some notes, and I feel like going back to where it started and like seeing how you kind of connect the dots to like when you first started way back in 2012. I think it'd be really cool for the viewers and for people who are interested in maybe starting something as well in the future, just to kind of see like how hard it is, or maybe like the different struggles and challenges you also face as a creator. So I'm gonna ask you a couple questions, but I'd love to get into just like how you started.
For sure.
The very first question: what is Wild Onion Villains? WOV, does that ring a bell?
Yeah, definitely. You really did research.
Yeah.
No, thanks for having me, dude. Thanks for inviting me to this. This is really dope.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it. But damn, you just kind of threw. I haven't
That one
talked
was
about.
way back. I went, like,
Yeah, you
all
really
the way
did
to
do
the roots.
research. That's dope.
Yeah.
No, Wild Onion Villains was this really big thing, but I think you just you mentioned something that kind of just like sparks ideas to me, where like going back to like where it all started. But I remember, I guess like the first thing that came to mind right now was like how me and you met, and it's very much like that. How everything I've ever done is just like that.
Just like walk into somewhere like
Just
where you
walking
wanna
in,
be.
vibing with someone, like getting to know them a little bit, and then just having an open mind all the time to be like, whatever, like who's this dude, like who's this cat, like let me talk to him, like let's see what he's about, like let's listen to ideas. And then I think I don't know if like subconsciously or consciously I do that, where I'm like, even if I know about a subject, I'll let the other person talk about it, because it's like, like it's new to them maybe, or if it's not new, it's old information that they just want to share.
You're just constantly trying to learn and
And
ask questions.
even if I have knowledge about all of what they're talking about, which I don't. There's no topic that I have all the knowledge about, but I just like to listen to.
Which is a great mentality
to
I think
see,
to have, because it's always like there's always room for improvement. And I feel like as a creator too, and as a businessman, it's if you're not like that, you're limiting yourself.
Yeah, maybe, possibly, yeah. But yeah, a lot of the things that I've done kind of just start like that, just listening to someone else and their ideas, and then seeing if there's any similarities and differences in ideas, and then just building off of that. And going back to your question about Wild Onion Villains, I'm just kind of thrown off a little bit.
Was that always the plan? So like when you first started that, did you just kind of have an idea where you're like, yo, I have access to a couple T-shirts, I have some homies that maybe do T-shirt design and printing, and you're like, can we start a brand, or how'd that start?
A little bit of everything. I was at that time I was working at a bar/restaurant, and I was doing basically just busboy and bar back. And at slow times, I would just hang out in the back, with like the kitchen guys. And I always loved being in the kitchen, like not cooking necessarily, but like I love the energy of the kitchen and how it needs to work for like you to get your food on time and like not complain about it. It's always been so crazy. One of my favorite jobs is being a food runner, because it's like this mad system behind the scenes, behind the doors, that needs to function in a certain way for you literally to get your food at the same time as your guests, or like whoever you're with. It's just so wild to me. But
as a customer, you don't really think about that.
You don't,
specifics.
So it's like sometimes, I don't know, you get your food and it's like a little not warm enough or too cold or whatever it is. It's just like, it's not a big deal, and like no one in the kitchen's gonna be offended. They're just gonna heat it back up, or or not, and send it back out, and then you'll be fine. But anyways, I used to hang out in the kitchen, and there was this guy in the kitchen. His name's Adam Smith, and he had just moved from Georgia to Chicago and lived in the building where like this restaurant was. So I would just like see him in the back sometimes, like working on his motorcycle, and then out of nowhere he started working in the kitchen. So we started like kind of talking, going back and forth, and he was telling me that he had a background in screen printing. So we just kind of get the ball rolling there. And at the time, I had my homie Mingo had a clothing brand, or had this idea of starting a clothing brand called Born and Hated. And so I was like, yo, I'm learning about screen printing. Like, let's link up. Let's talk about this. And straight
just
up,
like brainstorm.
Yeah, brainstorm. And straight up, I learned how to, take like screens and like put emulsion on them and cure them and then basically expose them, kind of like photography. And then we didn't have a dryer or any other equipment, so we were literally like, you hold the screen down and I'll pull the squeegee and don't move, you know. And to cure it, we would literally put it in my oven. I used to live in this little studio apartment in Logan Square.
So it was just like
we just set it in the oven, like literally putting a t-shirt in the oven for it to cure and cook and bake.
And that was just, you just did like random designs at that point?
Yeah, it was just me and Mingo just thinking of this clothing brand called Born and Hated. But I mean, he's a creative person, I'm a creative person, and when you put two creative people together, they're bound to just bump heads, you know? Like, a lot of cool stuff will come out of it, but most of the time, you just bump heads.
Creative differences.
Yeah, creative differences and things like that. I really had this idea, I think, if I remember correctly, of like taking the and sign and making it like the logo of the brand, you know, or like where it would land, and just Mingo didn't really fuck with it. So I was just like,
you were ready to start like your own thing.
Yeah, I had ideas, you know, and he had ideas too. And it just didn't work out. So I think, you know, losing interest in something like that, you slowly make yourself busier with other things. Not necessarily like leave it, but you just can't make this meeting now and can't meet up or whatever comes up. And that's kind of just how it started. And eventually, I don't even think it was like a spoken thing. We just like went our own ways. He started pushing out stuff with Born and Hated, and I thought it was dope. And right around the same time, I just like was left with this like need to create and like produce like that in that sense. So I just would like stay up at night just trying to think of ideas. I found my little sketchbook the other day where I like just wrote ideas of what.
Just like brainstorm, jot down at like
jot down, you know. I think there was like multiple different names that the clothing brand at that time could have been
before WOV.
Before WOV, yeah. And none of them really hit. And then I think one day I was out with my homie Oscar, who does Birria Tacos now.
Yeah.
I was out with him, you know, we were just young, like we were just riding around bicycles around the city and hit up bars. I think maybe had turned 21 at that time. And I remember just like coming back to my studio in Logan Square, you know, just like one open room, and I think he was like sleeping on the bed or something, and like so I was just like sitting on the couch till like 5, 6 in the morning, like just like looking stuff up online, like what did Chicago mean, like where that name derived from, things like that. And I was just like writing all these ideas down, probably out drinking the night before. And I remember going to bed that morning like super excited. Probably fell asleep around 5 or 6, you know, and woke up full of ideas, man. I remember that so vividly. Like I woke up at like probably 9 a.m., 10 a.m. Like, yo, get up! Like, yo, I just came up with this crazy idea last night.
MCD, right?
Yeah, it was MCD, and it was supposed to be like that was like one of the, you know.
That was the first idea where you're like, all right.
No, it wasn't the first idea necessarily. It was definitely an idea for the name of the brand, but it was supposed to be also a dig. I was doing graffiti back in the day, like.
But you used to write.
Yeah, I used to write.
Okay.
Yeah, and I had started this crew with a few friends called JK Crew, and our big rival for I guess forever, like we used to like beef all the time, was DCM.
Okay.
So it was almost like I wanted to do this, and we called it.
It would have been backwards.
Yeah, it would have been backwards. Yeah. So it was supposed to be this like double thing, like, oh, I want to start a clothing brand, but also like take a dig at them forever.
Yeah.
You know?
Did you ever proceed with that? Did you like
No. It was. I'm just mentioning because it was in that little notebook I found where it was, you know, it was that night of like going back and forth in names. Right. But I landed it with like Wild Onion Villians, and it was, you know, it meant much more because, you know, I guess before the channels of the river got reversed, because I guess the Chicago River flows in the opposite direction that it naturally would, and it was an architectural design, I believe, and because before that it would cause flooding, like in this area where we live, and all the flooding, when it would like recede, would make wild onions grow everywhere. So the native people used to call this place like stinky onion, wild onion, because it smelled like that. So the actual Chicago is a translated word, or like modified word. It's a French word to represent what the natives used to call it, which was, I probably don't know how to pronounce it, but it starts with an SH, like Chicago or something like that, right? And then, like I said, I don't know how to pronounce it, so like, but that's essentially it. And then I guess some of the first settlers that came to this area were French, so they translated that to Chicago. and that was the name of it, right?
So with roots, actually, you know, like
Yeah.
literally, that's
Yeah.
what you were trying to aim for. You're like keep it with the culture, keep it like from
Yeah,
the city that you know that you love.
exactly. Yeah, and going back to like what it meant to someone before settlers like landed here, you know. But yeah, the I was really surprised about the channels, and like there's the Y-shaped like river when it splits and it goes to north and south, and it's part of like the Chicago like emblem. If you like look in there, they put it there, they snuck it in. But anyways, that's kind of just what it meant back in the day. So I wanted to make sure I represented that, you know. My ancestors are Mayan, so I was like, and I'm not from this land, but I was like, I wanted to pay tribute to them as well by you know, researching and like knowing what the land and whose land it was before
Like
that.
actually, so like if you're gonna publish something, you want to actually be legit and be authentic. You're like, yo, I'm gonna be for real on this.
Yeah. And that was the idea behind Wild Onions. Villains was the second part to it, right? So there's the first part where it's like, this land isn't ours to claim, and it belonged to other people. And then the villains thing was to represent immigrants and immigrants in this country. You know, I migrated here, so, and it was like this label, right? Like immigrant sounds so, I don't know, like taboo at times to like talk about, or to say like I'm an immigrant. It's so weird at times.
It's like gritty almost.
Yeah. So, and the same thing with like villains, right? Like, and I always had this thing against Disney where it was like, you know, you label villains and heroes, or like, I forgot what they use for heroes all the time, but like, yeah, it's just this thing, right? But a good example was Lion King to me. It was like, all right, the hyenas and the lions do the exact same thing, right? They will hunt, they will eat the same animals, they will kill the same animals, but why is the lion seen as the hero and the hyenas as the villains?
Really? Yeah. I mean,
Right, because they have the same thing, but it was just how they were portrayed.
But the lion is the king of the jungle.
They're like, lion's the king of the jungle. And I'm talking about real life. Like in the movie, of course, we know why the lions are the heroes.
The
I'm
story
talking about
goes
real
deeper.
life. Yeah, the story goes deeper. I'm talking about real life, right? Like the hyenas build a pack. In this pack, it isn't always the lion who is the leader or the male who's the leader. There, it could be male or female.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know. It's this more realistic thing. Lions, you know, the females are the ones that hunt, and the lions just chill and reap the benefits, and then they're labeled the kings, you know. So I was like, yo, why did Disney?
This, like, this majestic creature that's just like they hold it down.
Yeah, I was like, why is it that, you know, like, I don't know, it just seems so weird. But anyways, there's this whole thing that Disney created, and like, you think of hyenas, you're just like, yeah, no, those are no good. You know, you think of lions, you're like, everyone wants a lion tattoo on themselves. They don't want a hyena tattoo on them.
Typical lion hand tattoo, or,
you know, with the crown on top. But it was just kind of part of that. You know, I wanted to like explore that. So
you were like, I'm gonna take pride in like, you know, like the grittiness, like the villain side, like, yo, like I mean, that's what Chicago also is known for, that hardcore, that rough nature.
Yeah. You know, the whole label of like, whether it's a criminal, villain, immigrant, there was this label, and there's a lot of energy with like calling something or someone that, right? And it's like, cool, like energy's energy. Let me take that energy, you know, kind of like harness it, and then like flip it around and push it back out. And when I push it back out, I want it to be positive to me and my community and whoever else is labeled this way, you know. So that was the second part of Wild Onion Villains. And somehow subconsciously that day I came up with this plan of a 3-phase thing where like I wanted it to be called Wild Onion Villains, and subconsciously it helped me market the brand, because people were like, oh, what's Wild Onion mean? And I would tell them the story about Chicago, you know, and they'd be like, yo, I need this, you know. And it's like, this is real Chicago shit. And like, so I like was able to like, you know, promote the brand and like get sales through like my close groups, because people wanted to rep it.
Because they felt like an attachment to it also.
Yeah.
Like, it's from their city too. They probably built like a strong connection.
For sure. Yeah. And then the second phase was rebranding it to WOV. And then the third phase was rebranding it again to just be called Villains. You know, because Villains is catchy.
You like laid it out, you're like, it's going to start from this. And then
subconsciously somehow. I had it in my notes, so I looked it up and I was like, yo, what was up that night? Like, what was in the air that night that, like, you know, I did all this, like, while I was up to, like, 5 in the morning. But it was dope. But that's what Wild Onion Villains was. You know, it still kind of is. I still talk about it, and I still, like, homies still ask, like, yo, when are you gonna do something again? You know, and it's luckily, thankfully, I'm busy enough to like, and that isn't even like a thought right now. It's in the back burner, way in the back,
Right.
but it's still part of me.
It did what you eventually wanted it to do for you, which was use it as like a launch pad to keep working as a creator.